On this day, August 8, 2025, a grave new chapter has been written in the annals of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Israeli Security Cabinet, under the leadership of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has formally approved a plan for the direct military occupation of Gaza City. This is not a temporary incursion. This is a blueprint for indefinite control. The stated objective is to displace the remaining Palestinian civilians from the northern part of the Strip, relocating them to camps in central Gaza. This represents a significant escalation, transforming the landscape of the conflict from a brutal war into a formalized, long-term occupation of what was once a bustling urban center. The language used by the state is clinical, but its implications are profound, signaling an intention to reshape the demographic and political reality of Gaza permanently. The official principles laid out by the cabinet are presented as a path to security. They speak of disarming Hamas, returning all captives, and the complete demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. However, beneath this veneer of strategic necessity lies a more unsettling ambition: the establishment of ongoing Israeli security control over the entire enclave. This control is to be paired with the installation of a new civil administration, one that is explicitly not Hamas, but also crucially not the Palestinian Authority. This effectively dismantles any semblance of Palestinian self-governance, creating a power vacuum that Israel alone will fill. The plan, therefore, is not merely about security, it is about the assertion of total dominance and the erasure of an indigenous political structure. The announcement follows a pattern of rhetoric and action that has been building for months. Prime Minister Netanyahu had previously declared Israel's intent to take control of all of Gaza, a statement later softened for international audiences, with claims that long-term governance was not the goal. Yet, the actions on the ground and the formalization of this plan tell a different story. The plan is to create a security perimeter, a buffer zone, effectively annexing parts of Gaza for Israeli military use. Control will then supposedly be handed to unspecified Arab forces, an ambiguous proposition that deflects from the immediate reality of Israeli military rule and the profound consequences for the Palestinian population trapped within this new paradigm of control. This strategic pivot comes nearly 2 years after the devastating attacks of October 7, 2023, which resulted in the deaths of approximately 1,139 Israelis and the capture of over 200 individuals. The war that followed has been relentless, but this new plan marks a deliberate shift from a campaign of bombardment to one of direct, sustained occupation. It is a plan that senior Israeli military officials have reportedly warned against, fearing it will mire the army in a perpetual quagmire, an endless cycle of insurgency and repression. The political leadership, however, appears determined to pursue this course, regardless of the warnings from its own security establishment or the condemnation of the international community, forging ahead with a vision of control at any cost. The human cost of this conflict has already reached staggering proportions, but the new occupation plan promises to deepen the suffering exponentially. As of August 2025, the Palestinian death toll has surpassed 61,250, with more than 152,000 wounded. These are not just numbers, they represent generations lost, families shattered, and a society pushed to the brink of collapse. The plan to forcibly displace tens of thousands more civilians from Gaza City will compound an already dire situation. Nearly 2 million people are already internally displaced, living in catastrophic conditions where food, water, and shelter are scarce commodities. The World Food Programme's warnings of an ongoing catastrophe and the imminent risk of widespread famine are now more urgent than ever. The infrastructure of life in Gaza has been systematically dismantled. Gaza City, once home to 700,000 people, is now a landscape of ruins. Hospitals, schools, water treatment facilities, and residential buildings have been reduced to rubble. The forced demolition of homes is not limited to Gaza. In East Jerusalem, a Palestinian family was recently compelled by Israeli authorities to demolish their own house, displacing 16 people. The new plan ensures that any possibility of rebuilding or returning for the residents of Gaza City is extinguished. They are not being moved for their safety. They are being moved to facilitate a military takeover of their land, their homes, and their history, effectively erasing their presence from the northern strip. The health crisis is particularly acute, especially for the most vulnerable. acute malnutrition among children under 5 has reached the highest levels ever recorded in the region, with nearly 12,000 young children suffering from its debilitating effects. Aid delivery, the fragile lifeline for this desperate population, is itself a deadly enterprise. Convoys are blocked by far-right Israeli protesters, as seen at the Allenby Bridge, or become scenes of tragedy, such as when an aid truck overturned on a bombed-out road, killing 20 people seeking assistance. The system for providing humanitarian relief is broken, and this new phase of occupation threatens to sever the remaining threads of support, leaving a captive population at the mercy of starvation and disease. From the Palestinian perspective, this is not a security plan. It is a declaration of ethnic cleansing. Hamas has labeled the proposal a war crime, accusing Israel of deliberately sacrificing the remaining captives to pursue its territorial ambitions and evade legal accountability. For ordinary Palestinians, the plan is the culmination of decades of dispossession. It is another Nakba, a catastrophic displacement that echoes the events of 1948. The violence is not confined to Gaza. In the West Bank, Israeli settlers continue their campaign of intimidation, assaulting elderly men and destroying Palestinian property with impunity. The occupation of Gaza City is the centerpiece of a broader strategy to crush Palestinian aspirations for statehood and self-determination across all territories. The international condemnation of Israel's plan has been swift and nearly universal, yet it has done little to alter the state's trajectory. The United Nations Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, has demanded an immediate halt to the plan, stating unequivocally that it violates international law. He pointed to the International Court of Justice's landmark ruling from July 2024, which declared Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories unlawful and a form of racial segregation tantamount to apartheid. The new plan to forcibly displace a civilian population is a direct defiance of this ruling, a clear signal that Israel considers itself beyond the reach of international legal institutions and the norms they are meant to uphold. Major world powers have joined the chorus of opposition. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, condemned the plan and urged Israel to reconsider, reiterating calls for a ceasefire and a two-state solution. Other nations, including China, Turkey, and Australia, have echoed these sentiments, demanding an end to the hostilities. In a significant move, Germany announced the suspension of military exports to Israel that could be utilized in the Gaza offensive, a tangible action that demonstrates growing international impatience with Israel's conduct. These diplomatic rebukes highlight Israel's deepening isolation on the global stage, yet the government remains steadfast, shielded by its most powerful ally. The position of the United States remains a critical factor in this dynamic. President Donald Trump has effectively given Israel a green light, stating that decisions regarding expanded control in Gaza are matters for Israel to decide alone. This stance provides the diplomatic and political cover necessary for the Netanyahu government to ignore the global consensus. Without meaningful pressure from Washington, international resolutions and condemnations are rendered largely symbolic. The U.S. position perpetuates a system where its ally is granted exceptional status, free to violate international law without facing significant consequences, thereby undermining the very foundation of the global order it claims to lead. This defiance of international law and opinion is not an anomaly. It is a core component of the state's long-term strategy. By normalizing the occupation and the permanent displacement of Palestinians, Israel is creating facts on the ground that it hopes will become irreversible. The legal and diplomatic fallout is treated as a manageable cost of achieving its ultimate security and territorial objectives. The world can condemn, the UN can rule, and allies can protest. But as long as the military and political will to proceed exists, backed by unwavering support from the United States, the machinery of occupation will continue its relentless advance, grinding international law and human rights into the dust of Gaza City. While the Israeli government presents a united front to the world, its Gaza occupation plan has exposed deep and dangerous fractures within Israeli society itself. The political opposition has been scathing in its critique. Yair Lapid, the opposition leader, branded the plan a disaster that will lead to many more disasters, predicting a grim future of endless conflict. Former Defense Minister Benny Gantz, who recently left the war cabinet, criticized the move as indecisive and strategically unsound. This political dissent reflects a growing unease that the government's maximalist goals are not only unattainable, but are actively harming Israel's long-term security interests and its social cohesion. This criticism extends into the heart of the security establishment. Senior Israeli military officers, including the current IDF Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, have reportedly voiced strong opposition, warning that a permanent occupation of Gaza City would be a strategic trap. They fear it will bleed the military of resources, morale, and personnel, ensnaring soldiers in a brutal and unwinnable urban guerrilla war. Former heads of the Shin Bet and Mossad, Israel's domestic and foreign intelligence agencies, have echoed these concerns, calling the plan a very bad idea. They argue it endangers the lives of the remaining hostages and pushes Israel further into diplomatic isolation, sacrificing strategic wisdom for short-term political gains. Perhaps the most poignant opposition comes from the families of the hostages still held in Gaza. For them, the government's plan is a death sentence. They believe that a full-scale occupation of Gaza City will eliminate any chance of negotiating the release of their loved ones, estimated to be around 50 individuals, with only 20 believed to still be alive. Their protests have become a fixture in Tel Aviv, where they clash with police and demand the government prioritize a hostage deal over military escalation. Their anguish represents a powerful moral challenge to the state's narrative, highlighting the human cost of the government's choices, not only for Palestinians, but for its own citizens as well. The path forward is fraught with peril. The occupation of Gaza City, if it proceeds, will likely trigger a new, more entrenched phase of violence, solidify Israel's status as a pariah state for many, and extinguish any flickering hope for a two-state solution. Regional stability will be further eroded with ongoing skirmishes, like the recent Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon, threatening to escalate into a wider war. The future appears to be one of perpetual conflict, managed by a state that has chosen dominance over diplomacy and occupation over peace. The only certainty is that the cycle of violence will continue, leaving a legacy of destruction and despair for generations to come.